Kate and I are working on another mystery story with Karen Rowland, our private investigator, but on a recent trip, Kate indulged my passion for old country music by setting the radio to Willie's Roadhouse on SiriusXM. As many of you know, at least half, if not more, of old country songs fit the loving wives genre. The song that played on the air sparked an idea in my head. Charlie's Shoes by Billy Walker is a song about a man who desires another man's wife, and so it begins. Sally and I were having dinner at the Chicken Coop, the best local joint for steak, music and dancing. When she walked in, Henry Phillips walked in right behind her. Something caught my attention, causing Sally to turn towards the door and then back to me. I didn't notice I was staring until Sally spoke. God, Dwayne, try to get your eyes back into place, and please close your mouth. I was embarrassed, to put it mildly. It's just that the one who was with Henry was the most beautiful creature I've ever seen in real life. She had to be 5 feet 7 inches tall and weigh no more than 120 pounds, but she had curves. To top it all off, she wore clothes that showed off all the right places: high heels, a short skirt, a tight low-cut sweater, beautiful hair. Definitely not your typical small-town girl. I haven't seen Henry for at least 7 years. Then he went halfway around the world to make his fortune in the oil fields. Rumors said that Henry was doing well, not crazy rich, but enough to keep you comfortable for the rest of your life. It also seems to have allowed him to attract the type of women who want money. That's not to say Henry didn't have other strengths. He was our homecoming king and was voted best looking in our graduating class, which annoyed me because I was second. I could feel Sally still looking at me angrily. I turned around and apologized. I wasn't actually an asshole, and I understood how rude it was to stare at another woman while on a date with her. Okay, Dwayne, she's beautiful. I think all the ladies in the city will make an appointment tomorrow for a haircut and buy new outfits. Looks like we'll all have to catch up if she stays here. I didn't know Henry was back in town. What about you? I heard he came back last week with his wife and bought the Parker homestead down by the river. I heard his wife is beautiful, but damn, that's too much. While we were talking and finishing our steaks, Henry and his wife sat at the table opposite. I tried not to follow them with my eyes, and then the orchestra began to play. One of our local bands, the Slithering Snakes, played a decent mix of bluegrass, rock, and enough songs to keep the two of us dancing or snuggling tightly together. Sally and I ordered our usual drinks, her a margarita and me a long neck Lone Star. When the band played something that I could dance to without making a fool of myself or stepping on Sally's toes, I would invite her and she would say yes. A couple of other guys came to our table and asked me if they could dance with Sally. I said yes most of the time. The guys who hang out at the Coop are good guys who treat your date with respect, with one exception. The guy I said no to knew why and didn't argue. As I watched Sally on the dance floor, I couldn't help but notice that Henry's wife was also dancing, but not with Henry. I looked at Henry's table and our eyes met. I raised the beer in his direction and non-verbally offered to buy him another one. We were never close friends at school, but we were always friendly. Henry stood up from his table and walked over. Dwayne. Henry, how the hell are you? Okay, Dwayne, what about you? Not bad either. Sally says you got married and moved back to town. Yes, that's my wife in the red sweater, Ginny. Beautiful girl. How long have you been married? 6 months now. I made some good money in South America and decided to come home. I was finishing up some business in Dallas when I met Ginny. This is Sally. Who did I see you with? Yeah, she moved back to town last year. We've been dating for the past few months. Serious relationship. Probably. We've discussed exclusivity, but we haven't talked about marriage yet. Henry thought for a moment, remembering something, and grinned. I still remember her in her cheerleading outfit, jumping up and down with that big smile. I asked her out one day. Her dad met me at the door with a gun and sat me down to talk. Said since I was 2 years older than her. He thought that I thought she was easily accessible. I told him it was just a date, and I would bring her home before 11. He nodded and then called her down. I was a hot guy then and decided that this would be our last date. Henry smiled again. No offense, Dwayne, but I think she's prettier now than when we were in school, and she was damn attractive then. I smiled back to let Henry know it was okay, and we knocked our bottles together in a toast. Would you and your wife want to join us at the table? That would be nice. Ginny hasn't gotten to know many people in town yet. When the orchestra finished the song, Sally returned to the table. Henry went to meet Ginny and returned to our table where the introductions took place. The four of us sat and talked for a while before the ladies went back to dancing. I tried not to pay too much attention to Ginny and did not ask her to dance, although I really wanted to more than I was willing to admit. We parted ways around midnight and agreed to meet soon. Henry mentioned something about a boat on the lake. Over the next 3 months, we dated occasionally, just as couples. Henry and I were still very different. We had little in common. I enjoyed hunting and fishing. Henry was still an athlete, playing softball, basketball, and football, so we rarely spent time together, if not with our wives. But every time I was around Ginny, she seemed to take pleasure in teasing me. Sally and I arrived in the morning with a basket full of food and drinks. Sally wore a beautiful bikini underneath her summer dress. We got on the boat and Ginny came out of the cabin wearing one of the smallest bikinis I've ever seen. You could tell Henry was a little embarrassed by her choice of outfit, but like any man with a trophy wife, he remained silent in public. Later, while the two girls were sunbathing on the top deck, Ginny took off her top to sunbathe her breasts. As I walked over to hand the girls their drinks, I saw everything. I had sunglasses on, but that didn't fool Sally. That was the last time we spent time on the boat with Henry and Ginny. It was early December. Sally and I were in South Padre Island enjoying the weekend when I proposed to her. In hindsight, this probably ranks high on the list of most unromantic proposals. We had dinner at a nice seafood restaurant. There was a couple sitting nearby who had recently gotten engaged, and it sparked something in me. Have you thought about you and me, about marriage, Sally? What? Is this a proposal? Yeah, I guess. We've been dating for over a year. I thought you were waiting for me to propose, so I did. No, Dwayne, you're still not ready to settle down, and I'm not going to marry a man I can't trust every time he goes out on town. You need to grow up. I couldn't argue with Sally, and to be honest, I was relieved when she said no. It was just under a year after Ginny and Henry moved into town when Henry suddenly left without saying a word to anyone we knew. Rumors flew around the city about the reasons for his sudden departure. Like I said, we weren't close friends, so I was as much in the dark as anyone else. I asked Sally if she knew anything, but she said she knew no more than town gossip. An advertisement in the newspaper stated that Henry was no longer responsible for Ginny's debts, etc. Henry began divorce proceedings from Ginny before his leaving the city. Ginny continued to live in the mansion by the river, and we saw her from time to time. If anything, her flirting only intensified, which made Sally even angrier. Things came to a head one day when I received a phone call at the office. It was Ginny, and she asked me to come over and help her with some problem with her air conditioner. Henry was always doing these things. She was practically crying on the phone. I almost told her to call an air conditioner, and I should have done so. But I didn't do this, and instead drove to the house. Ginny greeted me in sweatpants and a t-shirt, barefoot, blonde with hair in a ponytail. One look at her, and I'm excited. I knew I was in trouble. The problem with the air conditioning turned out to be simple. It was one of those smart thermostats that had to be reprogrammed. I solved the problem and accepted the cold beer Ginny offered. That's when she started crying. Dwayne, I don't know why Henry left me. I was a good wife. We made love almost every day that we were married. I never turned him down. I know I flirted a little, but that always turned him on. Now I'm sitting alone in this big house and wondering what I could do to make him stay. As Ginny spoke, she seemed to move closer to me on the couch, almost as if she could move without moving. Or was I too fascinated by her beauty? And so, she was next to me, and it happened. Our lips pressed together and our tongues began to play together. The kiss lasted a minute before something clicked in my head. I pulled away. Ginny, I'm with Sally, and we made a vow to be exclusive. I can't do this. Oh, Dwayne, I'm sorry. I wouldn't want you to break your word, but it's obvious that we belong together. I won't try to seduce you anymore, at least not until you break up with Sally. I'm sorry. Tears were now flowing freely, and that's all it took for me to become the stupidest person I knew. When I told Sally that night that I was breaking up with her, her reaction completely stunned me. It's because of Ginny, isn't it? I didn't answer. I didn't need it. You're an idiot, Dwayne. I love you, but I won't beg you to stay. That's the reason I didn't marry you when you proposed. You're still a little boy in a grown man's body, and ever since that woman came to town, you wanted her. Now you can have her. Sally didn't cry. She just walked out of my house, got into her Jeep, and drove away. Within a few weeks of our separation, Sally moved to Austin, working in the governor's office on one of his councils. I think I should stop here to explain why I may have been Ginny's choice to replace Henry. My family owns several thousand acres of ranches in this county and a majority stake in a local community bank. Dad is the president of the bank. I've been working there since I graduated from SMU, and I'm being groomed to take my dad's place when he retires. In other words, we are covered. The day after my breakup with Sally, I found myself at Ginny's door, ringing the bell. 10 minutes after the call, we were naked, and I was kissing every square inch of her body. I saw almost everything her body had to offer when we were on Henry's boat. But this was different. Now I could touch and kiss her lips with passion, and most importantly, finally see what was hidden behind that tiny bikini bottom she wore that day on the boat. Ginny and I didn't bother getting dressed the rest of the weekend. We ate, swam, watched TV. Everything we did this weekend was completely naked, except for the time I put on an apron while grilling steaks. I've never met a woman so confident in her body. Every other woman I've known has found some kind of flaw in her personality yesness. Even Sally, in whom I could not find a single flaw, saw something that, in her opinion, should have been more ideal. Not Ginny. She knew she was perfect. If asked, "What would you change about your appearance or appearance?" Ginny would answer, "Nothing." And I couldn't object. Ginny and I became inseparable. And within 2 months, she convinced me that we should get married as soon as her divorce from Henry was over. I bought her a 2-carat diamond engagement ring and moved into a mansion. Then I learned that Ginny was rich at home, but relatively poor. The house had a steep mortgage. Monthly payments were $3,900. Ginny received the house and a lump sum of $100,000 as part of the divorce, which at her rate of spending would not have lasted 2 years. Henry left many personal items in the house. As I cleared out his closet to put my things in, I couldn't help but notice the marks on his suits and other clothes. Everything was from the best designers, from the best materials. Too bad Henry was a few inches shorter and a few pounds lighter than me. None of Henry's clothes fit me, and they all went into plastic bags that Ginny took to a thrift store in Dallas. Except for one pair of shoes. While we were packing, Ginny picked up a pair of shoes and held them up to my eyes. "What shoe size do you wear?" 11Y. Henry had 11 too. These cost over $500, and he only wore them once. I chose them. They are beautiful. I had to admit that Ginny was right. The shoes were nice and went well with my gray suit. I tried on the shoes and found out that Henry's were a D width, while mine were an E. But they looked so good that I decided to keep them, even though the shoes were pinching my feet. Another thing I found while cleaning out his closet was Berlitz language tapes in Portuguese. I wondered if this meant old Henry had gone to Brazil. I didn't say anything to Ginny. I just left the tapes where I found them. A week after Ginny's divorce was finalized, we flew to Vegas and got married. Mom and Dad were a little disappointed that we didn't have a local wedding, but my little sister threw a whole Tyrant Bride themed celebration last year, so I think Mom was secretly glad to avoid another wedding. She said we would have a reception for family and close friends later. We spent a week after the wedding in Vegas. We got married in a beautiful chapel. Ginny wore a fantastic white dress. I was wearing a nice suit and Henry's shoes, which kept pinching my toes as we stood there. We rented a limousine so I didn't have to walk much, but each step became more and more painful. I was annoyed that I couldn't dance in a nightclub in the evening. I ended up drinking too much and watching my new wife dance with other men and a few women while I nursed my wounds with drinks. Throughout that week, Ginny wore one sexy outfit after another. I didn't make the same mistake with shoes. We went to clubs and I danced with Ginny. I was so proud that I had such a beautiful wife that if you stuck a hairpin in my ass, I would burst. And Mike Tyson couldn't wipe the smile off my face. Vegas is full of beautiful women dressed to impress. And it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Ginny was in the top 1%. We even went to an upscale club. We bought each other a lap dance. The girl dancing for me was a skinny Asian girl, one of those women who just radiate sex. When she finished her dance, I picked Ginny up and rushed with her to our hotel. Within 10 seconds of entering the room, I stripped Ginny down to nothing but the clothes she was wearing and had sex with her. There was no need for foreplay. Ginny got out of bed, still wearing her shoes, high heels, and went to the bathroom. I left there and put the dress back on. Let's go play some gambling. Give me a minute. I need to go to the toilet and clean myself up. I'll meet you downstairs. Ginny picked up her small purse and left the room. I hurried, and in 3 minutes I was downstairs. Found Ginny behind the bar playing the poker machine. Some Italian was already trying to start a conversation with her, trying to look into her cleavage. I walked up behind her and put my arm around her waist, trying to look casual. "Hi, dear." I leaned over and kissed the top of her head. The guy looked annoyed, so I tried to diffuse the situation by explaining, "This is my wife." He had good manners to apologize. "Sorry, didn't notice the ring. You're lucky." When he left, I smiled at Ginny and returned his attention. "Yes, I know." Wednesday morning, after a relaxing morning of room service, a nice shower in which we rubbed each other's backs, and a rare session of lovemaking, Ginny decided to run to the pool while I finished my coffee and the Times crossword puzzle. She wore a beautiful blanket, platforms, a floppy hat, and Foster Grant sunglasses. She did what women do and pulled her sunglasses down her nose, peeking out from under the frames. "I'm going to the pool. I need a mimosa and some sun. Are you coming?" "I'll be there in 15 minutes. I need toilet time." "Don't keep me waiting. You need some tanning, paleface." Ginny turned and walked out the door. 20 minutes later, I was at the pool looking for her. It didn't take long to find her. She was the one the 3 fraternity students were standing around at the farthest chaise long. The boys ran away when I approached. "Damn, Ginny, think you've shown enough?" Ginny gave me a wicked smile in response. Nobody complained. Everyone seemed to be having fun. She was already a little drunk. There was an almost empty glass in her hand. I pointed at her drink. "How much did you drink?" "This is my second." My Oza quickly ran out, and the guys brought it to me. "I don't know what's in it, but it's delicious." I took it from her hands and tried it. It was almost pure alcohol. "They tried to get you drunk." Ginny smiled again. "I think they succeeded. Come on, sit down and keep me company. Save me from these bad boys." At this, Ginny looked at the 3 boys standing on the other side of the pool and waved and smiled at them. This was not the first or last time I realized that I could either live with Ginny's flirting or without Ginny flirting was part of her nature. After our honeymoon in Vegas, we returned home and settled into home life. Sex, sex, and more sex. I have never been so sexually satisfied in my life. This woman knew how to make love, and she knew how to turn me on. We went out into the city or to the country club, where Ginny constantly teased the men. After that, I took Ginny home and tried to have sex with her until she was oblivious, making her realize that she belongs only to me. Sometimes her flirting irritated me, and when I brought it up, Ginny would remind me that it was just her style. I flirted with you when I was married to Henry, and it didn't bother you. And let me remind you, it didn't lead to anything. I'm a one-man woman, Dwayne, and you're my only man. It was hard to argue with her logic, so I let it go. 2 months after the wedding, Ginny asked permission to go to Dallas for the weekend to spend time with her friends, shopping therapy. Several of her friends were already at our house, and they seemed like nice people. Besides, my dad had been inviting me to go rooster hunting in Nebraska for a long time. He was training a new hunting dog and wanted to see how it would cope. So I told Ginny, "Yeah, have fun." Ginny went to Dallas. Dad and I got into his Cessna Skyhawk and flew north. We had a great weekend. Springer did her job. On Saturday and Sunday morning, the owner released 10 birds each. The Springer drove all but one and brought back every bird we shot. Ginny came home on Sunday to find meat on the grill, cooking some pheasant breasts I brought. We ate, talked about our weekend, and the counter-sex was fantastic. After that weekend, Ginny began requesting a trip to see her friends about once a month. This didn't bother me because I spent those weekends hunting or fishing. Every time she came back, she was hot on fire to have sex with me and get what I needed, as she said. It turns out I was the one who was blind. One afternoon, a few days after one of Ginny's days off, I came home for lunch and decided instead of a sandwich that I wanted midday sex. Ginny was sunbathing by the pool, getting tanned from all angles. I walked over and had sex with her. I collapsed on Ginny as she collapsed onto the lounge chair. I moved her long blonde hair away from her neck to kiss her there when I saw it just below her hairline. What the hell? Ginny obviously didn't know it was there. I might not have even noticed it if we weren't in the bright sun, but there was nothing to be confused about. It was a love bite on the back of the neck. I got up with Ginny and fell into the pool. The cold water of the pool gave me time to think. I got out of the pool and told Ginny that I needed to go back to the office to meet with a client. After settling into the main bathroom, I got dressed and went into town. Once at my desk, I paused to think, perhaps for the first time seriously thinking about my marriage and relationship with Ginny. Of course, the sex was phenomenal, and having such a beautiful wife was incredible. While I was thinking about all this, I realized that we have so little in common. Books. Ginny read nothing but fashion and celebrity magazines. A television. She watched reality. Shows that I couldn't stand and I had to. Leave the room. In the open air. Ginny's idea of harsh conditions was that she was running out of ice for her drink. Music, no, and so on down the list. One thing we did have in common was that we both loved Ginny. I picked up the phone and called Ed Johnson, a detective at the agency we used for investigations and personnel screening. Ed and I discussed the situation and agreed on a plan. He also advised me to contact our lawyer to begin protecting my financial interests. I knew I couldn't pretend for 3 or 4 weeks until Ginny's next trip to Dallas. So after we made love that night, I made up a story about another hunting trip with Dad and told Ginny that she could take the opportunity to do a little shopping. Ginny agreed immediately. This weekend Dad and I spent at the ranch. Ginny went to Dallas. It was a long weekend, and not necessarily a sober one. Later Monday morning, Ed was sitting in my office. "Dwayne, do you know Ginny's friend named Janet Kelly?" "No, this name doesn't mean anything to me. She was not one of the women who came to our house." "Why?" "She's the one Ginny stayed with over the weekend. She's a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader and very pretty, about the same league as Ginny. 2 of them came out Friday night dressed to kill. It was hard to keep track of them after they left Janet's condo. Uber made it really difficult to track the property. So we had to use 3 operatives, and it cost you a pretty penny. Sorry. Come on, Ed. I know you're taking your time. I'm not going to cry on your shoulder. What did you find? 2 of them visited the club. They were drinking, dancing, and generally acting like a couple of free women on the hunt. They picked up 2 guys and spent the night at a friend's condo. We staked out the condo, and the guys didn't leave until 8 a.m. the next day. Unfortunately, we have no evidence that your wife did anything that night. That's why we had to follow them again on Saturday. We got lucky on Saturday. Sorry, that didn't sound right. Ed looked embarrassed, apologizing. There's no easy way to say this. Your wife is a cheater. I had a husband and wife team with me, which was fortunate. Ginny and her friend went to a sex club. My team was able to sneak in because they were a couple. They personally witnessed Ginny having sex with 3 other men at the same time. They are sure that she had sex with others, but they could not see everything, so as not to be noticed. Were you able to take photographs? No, these places are strictly controlled. It is impossible to bring any camera into the back rooms where the sex occurs. I have photographs of her coming and going, but nothing from the inside. My people will sign affidavits about what they saw. They have already written their reports and will testify in court, which should be sufficient for any decision. Ed and I finished our business, and I kept my promise. I didn't cry on his shoulder. After he left, there may have been a few tears in my eyes, but the news was not unexpected. From the moment I saw that damn bruise, I knew something was going on, although the sex club was a surprise. I thought she had a boyfriend in Dallas, not that she was trying to sleep with the whole city. I called my lawyer to finish the paperwork and register everything. Then it hit me like a block of bricks. I called Ed. Hello, Ed. Did Ginny use condoms at the club? Yeah, that's another thing this place insists on. No sex without protection. Thank you, Ed. I hung up. Well, that was a relief, although it didn't guarantee she'd used them on Friday night or any other previous weekend. I made a note to check my health. At first, Ginny cried and begged when I sued her, but when I told her that she was being followed to a sex club, she could only say, "Oh, shit." After this revelation, she stopped calling. The divorce went better than expected. Ginny got some fancy lawyer from Dallas. My lawyer tore it to shreds in court. It didn't help Ginny's case when she was caught going in and out of a sex club within a year of our wedding, and the testimony of 2 detectives. It didn't help that my grandfather wasn't a fool. The ranch and bank shares were inviolable, and it didn't help that we filed for divorce in our county. We had home advantage. Karen Davis, my lawyer, did nothing unethical, but she knew exactly how to use her cards to the best advantage. I paid Ginny $30,000, and she had to pay her own legal fees. She kept the house that Henry left her when he left. I left the court and looked around. It was a bright Texas morning. The sun was shining on the white courthouse, and flowers were planted on both sides of the steps, planted by the Lady Committee to beautify Fort Travis. Opposite, there were more flowers around 2 flagpoles standing in the middle of the square. The city is no longer hanging stars and bars. Of course, it caused a great stir when the council voted for it. Many of the men from Fort Travis fought, and half of them died, for the Confederacy. The uproar died down when Jake Olson proposed replacing the Confederate flag with one to honor those missing and captured during the war. 3 boys from this county died in Vietnam, and it still stings. You can't say McNamara without someone spitting on the ground. As I stood on the steps and breathed in the fresh air, my thoughts began to clear. A short marriage and quick divorce made me rethink my life. Let's think I didn't like my job. I hated working in an office. I didn't like living in a huge modern villa. I liked being outdoors. I found that having sex with a sex machine was fun. But it doesn't compare to the emotional love I used to share with Sally. I realized that if I married again, it would be to a woman who could also be my best friend. A woman who could agree to camp, hunt, and fish with me, and who would still be happy to dress like a lady when the occasion called for it. In other words, a woman like the one I left to marry Ginny, a woman like Sally. I decided to get my life in order, step by step. First, Dad and I talked about my work. Dad surprised me with his response to my suggestion that perhaps banking was not my field. Damn, boy, how long did it take you? I can't believe it took you so long to think about it. You don't belong to the office. Any plans? Dad, Miguel is retiring in a few years. What do you say if I spend these years working on the ranch and take his place when Miguel retires? You are reading my mind. We thought Jason would take Miguel's place. He told us last month that he doesn't feel confident in the position. He doesn't think he has the communication skills, and he's probably right. It would be great if you joined the ranch, spend the next few years gaining experience, and then take Miguel's place when the time comes. One more thing, Dad. I was thinking about renovating my grandfather's hunting lodge by the lake. Make it less like a cottage and more like a home. Will this be okay? Dad smiled. More than normal, consider it yours. Do with it what you want. 2 weeks later, I began a new stage of my life. I was 29 and I had never been happier. I did all the dirty work on the ranch. It's not that I didn't spend time there in the summer, but now it was different. Now I paid attention to detail because one day it will be my responsibility. Miguel was fantastic. He worked on the ranch for 30 years, working his way up to senior. He and his wife, Juanita, were looking forward to traveling when he retired. Their children and grandchildren lived in California, and that's where they wanted to spend their days. He was as interested in teaching me as I was in training. In the first 6 months, I spent all my free time renovating and updating the old hunting lodge. It was a log house, and the logs were in decent condition, but I hired a crew to sandblast the exterior walls before applying a coat of protective coating and resealing the seams between the logs. The interior needed some serious work. The house had been sitting untouched for too long and needed to be rid of mice and bugs before I could go inside. I updated the kitchen and appliances, installed new doors, and replaced the windows with modern double glazing that actually opened and had mosquito nets. Once the place was spruced up, I held an open house for a few friends and my family. Most everyone admired, especially those who were inside when it was Grandpa's hunting cabin. It was my mother who asked the $64,000 question. Now that you have everything set up, how are you going to spend your free time? Hopefully not in bars. I didn't think about it, Mom. I'm guessing you have an idea if you're bringing it up. You know, some of the women from the church are involved in a housing project. Come to the next meeting. We have several projects in which you could take part. That's how I eventually became indirectly involved in their church's charitable activities. One day during my first year, I went to Sally's parents' house. Sally was still working in Austin for the governor. I brought her mother a beautiful bouquet of flowers and her father a bottle of Angel Envy rye. I thought a $100 bottle of whiskey would get me through the door. He invited me inside, poured us a couple of sips of this golden drink, then proceeded to do what he always did, give me instructions. I know your dad. He is a good person, a person you can trust just by a handshake. For most of your life, I thought you had the same manners as your dad. Sally said you didn't cheat on her. You ended everything before you got involved with that bitch. This is probably in your favor. But you made my girl cry. Every man has one chance in life to be stupid. I won't interfere with you if that's what Sally wants. But let me warn you, if you make my girl cry a second time, I will find you and hurt you. Can you live with this? I said I could. We chatted about everything for another half hour. We agreed to go fishing together. I invited him to join Dad and I the next time we went to Nebraska. When I left, I was going to call Sally and try to make the relationship work again. Sally was kind enough to answer the phone and made me happy when she agreed to have dinner. We ate at a place on the corner from her apartment in Austin. I think she chose this place so that I wouldn't have to go home to pick her up. We met in a restaurant. I was more nervous than if I were holding a bag of rattlesnakes. Dinner went well. Sally was friendly. but rejected my request to start dating again. She tried to soften it by explaining that the distance between us would make the relationship difficult, but I felt that she was still hurt by my previous actions. I walked Sally home, received a goodbye kiss on the cheek, and drove home to an empty cabin. I was invigorated by the coffee and the ride, so I sat on the porch with a mug and looked at a million stars on this bright night. Things didn't go according to plan, but I vowed not to make any more mistakes. I will accept my disappointment like an adult. I didn't date much, I just didn't have any interest. I also haven't had sex for over a year since my divorce. It wasn't easy. Talking about going from sexual ecstasy to nothing was terrible. No, there was no sex until I met Rosie one night at the Hen. Rosie was once truly wild. There were rumors about her that she was easily accessible, just the kind of girl who didn't wait for the third date to find herself in the back seat. I never had fun in those days. She was too young for me. Rosie went to college and came back a changed woman, worked at a credit union in the finance department. Rosie and I were chatting at the bar. I must have had too much beer because I poured my heart out about losing Sally, what I was looking for in a wife, and how I tried to keep it in my pants until I found the right woman, a woman who will hunt, fish, and camp with me. Rosie must have eaten too much Cosmos. Well, it's not me. Dwayne, I get upset when I break a nail. But I'll tell you something, I haven't had sex in a year, and I can't get enough of it. Tell you what, let's talk tomorrow when you're both sober. I have a proposal for you. That's how Rosie became my friends with benefits partner. Sex with Rosie could have been called lovemaking, except neither of us said the word love to each other. During these 8 months, we met 2 or 3 times a month. We both had our reasons for being discreet and keeping the arrangement hidden from prying eyes. We greeted each other publicly, but never met and never stayed overnight. Rosie Cruz has a beautiful face and an exceptional body. Smiling eyes, dark brown hair, ample breasts, feminine hips tapered to a thin waist. The skin was dark and flawless, although one should hesitate before calling her a Mexican beauty. The only time Rosie got in trouble at school was in 5th grade, when some stupid 6th grader called Rosie a wet woman and she should go back to Mexico. After knocking the boy onto his back with a blow to the nose, Rosie straddled his waist and, after punching him in the face, explained that her great-great-great-grandfather fought with Sam Houston at the Battle of Jacinto, and his son rode with Captain John Coffee Hayes, and that her father was a sergeant in the Texas Rangers. Rosie's heritage history lesson was interrupted when the cafeteria attendant pulled her away from the boy and took her to the principal's office, and received a 3-day suspension for fighting from the principal and praise from her father. She also learned a valuable lesson. Those who hit back get into trouble and are punished. We separated in January when Sally returned to Fort Travis. Sally returned, still unmarried and apparently free, after a change of governors in Austin. Whether her return would be temporary or permanent depended on the benevolent forces at work behind the scenes. By then, Mom's Group, Caring Episcopalians for Affordable Housing, was registered as a nonprofit. But there were more questions than a group of ladies, however sincere and determined, could solve as volunteers. For example, where to build. You can't just put 20 low-income townhouses in the middle of a middle-class neighborhood and expect everyone to go out, form a drum circle, and sing Kumbaya together as a sign of social harmony. Many municipalities have tried different approaches to this issue, some with success, others with disastrous failure. I didn't know my mother was so cunning. It turns out that, until recently, Sally Jenkins was the only one working on similar projects in the governor's office. The organization needed an executive director, and there was a qualified candidate who needed the job, or she might leave again. Not that it helped me. Sally was still friendly to me when we met by chance or at one of the committee meetings, but she showed no romantic interest, and I didn't ask her out. However, we went to Dallas together a few months after she returned home. Henry Phillips returned to the States and was seriously ill. Malaria and several other health problems confined him to a hospital bed in Dallas. Sally agreed to go to Dallas with me to visit him. We spent most of the trip discussing the housing issues she was facing. It was a polite conversation. I was again convinced how smart she is. We spent an hour with Henry before Sally excused herself to make a couple of calls. Henry took the opportunity to talk about Ginny. Dwayne, sorry, I didn't warn you. Dude, when I found out that Ginny was cheating on me, the only thing that came to mind was to run away. I thought most people already knew and were laughing at me behind my back. I didn't think you'd leave Sally and get involved with her. I thought you and Sally were fine. There was no point in arguing with Henry, especially when he was right. Well, I was stupid. I want you to know something. I didn't touch Ginny until you got divorced, and I didn't know she was cheating on you. I would tell you if I knew. Obviously, since it took me 6 months to realize that she was cheating on me too, I would tell you if I knew. Sally came back into the room about then, and we changed the subject. Henry told us more stories about what it was like in the Amazon jungle. I need a favor, Dwayne, and it's a big ask, so feel free to refuse. I need someone I can trust on a personal and financial level to handle my affairs in Brazil. I will give you the names of my partner, banker, lawyer, and business contacts. I know I'm going to get scammed out of a lot of money. That's just the way things work, especially out there in the oil industry. But if I can get back 25% of what's mine, I'll be settled for a while. I'll give you 20% of what you bring back. As you can imagine, Henry's request was unexpected, and I couldn't answer him right away. He told me to come back to him when I had time to think and with questions. One obstacle was obvious. I do not speak Portuguese. Do you know Spanish? You can pick up some Portuguese. With your Spanish, English, and 100 words of Portuguese, you can handle it. But you need to give me an answer soon. Every week, part of my share will flow away. We left the question at that point. Visiting hours were over, and it was time to go home. Sally and I were driving back from Dallas. It was quieter in the car than on the way there. Sally was lost in thought until she broke the silence. Are you thinking of doing this? Go to Brazil. Yes. Miguel is at least a year away from retirement, and I need to somehow earn money toward it during this time. There's nothing keeping me in Fort Travis right now. I thought you and I had a chance when you came back to town, but I see that I ruined everything too much. Sally had tears in her eyes. Will you be careful? I have no desire to die, if that's what you mean. I will try to be as careful as possible. Sally looked at me as I dropped her off at her parents' house. She even kissed me on the lips. Please promise me to be careful. She ran to the door. And that's how I ended up in Brazil. Mom was against it, Dad too, but he still stuck to the old, that's what men do attitude and didn't object. A week later, I flew from Dallas to Sao Paulo. My Brazilian adventure turned out to be less dangerous than I expected, which was good for me. Henry's Brazilian business partner, João Fernandes, was more honest than expected and was just as eager to make the deal as Henry was. Lawyers, bankers, and accountants all pitched in. The Brazilian-European conglomerate was keen to take over, and within 3 months, the deal was signed, approved, and completed. As a result, Henry's share was just over $1.5 million after fees, taxes, and other things. My share was $300,000. Not bad for just over 3 months of work. I said that the trip was less dangerous than expected, but there were a couple of tense moments. One incident occurred on the road from Sao Paulo to the oil fields. We were traveling in 2 trucks, Henry's team in one, the conglomerate team in the other, when we were attacked by bandits. The bandits chose the wrong convoy to attack. Each vehicle carried 2 ex-Brazilian commandos. No shots were fired after the commandos made their presence known. Still, it was scary. I would feel safer if I had one of my rifles. But this was prohibited by local laws. There was another incident, this time in a bar in Sao Paulo on the last night before I left. We drank, congratulating ourselves on being rich and certainly alive. In the far corner of the hall, a quarrel began. Suddenly, two men got up from the table and started shooting at each other. From the corner of my eye, I saw two men at the bar reach into their jackets and pull out pistols. That's the last thing I saw because I ducked under the table. Joe did the same, and we butted heads. For the next minute, which seemed much longer, I heard 20 or more shots fired. When Joe and I finally emerged from under the table, we expected to see bodies and destruction, but they were not there. Even the four shooters had disappeared. How four men could fire more than 20 bullets without hitting anyone remains a mystery to me. I left the bar in a hurry, went to the hotel, locked the door, and stayed in my room until my flight the next morning. Goodbye, Brazil. I visited Henry first thing after landing in DFW. He was still recovering and was happy with the payment, thankfully, and it ended up strengthening our friendship. I went back to working on the ranch. The second week after returning from Brazil, I walked into Hen's, only to see Sally sitting at a table with Rosie. Oh, damn, was all I could think. Trying to avoid a scene, I walked to the other end of the bar and sat next to Dexter Price, a Hen House regular. Frances, the waitress, placed a couple of beers in front of Dexter and me and then whispered in my ear, "The two ladies bought you both a beer. You are invited to their table if you can leave." I knew it wouldn't be difficult for Dexter. He was happy with free beer and wasn't one for chatting. I apologized and walked the plank to the ladies' table. It turned out to be a good evening. The three of us talked, and from time to time some cowboy would ask one of the ladies to dance. I also danced with each of them. We closed the place, and I walked Sally and Rosie to their cars, giving each a little kiss goodbye. The next morning, a little before noon, a car pulled up to my house. "Hi, Dwayne. Can I have a cup of coffee?" "Certainly. Do you want eggs?" I was just about to cook something. Sally sat at the bar while I prepared breakfast, as if 3 years had not passed. "I had a good talk with Rosie. She said that you loved me even when you were together." "What happened between Rosie and me was when you lived in Austin. We broke up when you returned home." "That's exactly what Rosie said. She thinks I should give you another chance. Rosie is a wise woman, and smart too. Dad said that you have matured, and I would be a fool if I didn't give you another chance. He wants you as a son-in-law. Well, your dad is also a smart man, and apparently I'm lucky that you don't have a sister." Sally smiled at this. "Another smart person is your mother. I know starting a housing co-op wasn't her goal, but it allowed me to stay in Fort Travis and gave us a chance to get to know each other again. I won't argue with you about Mom. Without her, you wouldn't be sitting in my kitchen right now. Have you grown up, Dwayne?" I told Sally everything I had done since my divorce from Ginny to change my life. How spending time with her dad and my dad instead of out of college bros changed me. How I now know what I want to do with my life: run the ranch operations when Miguel retires, have a family with a bunch of kids, help my mom with her charity now that I'm older. How, with the exception of a short-term relationship with Rosie, I was chaste because I now knew the difference between sex and love. Sally listened without interruption until I finished. "Do you want to know anything about my time in Austin?" asked Sally. "We broke up." "Sally, I don't think I have the right to ask. I want you to know two things. I never stopped loving you, Dwayne, and I was in a relationship with a man in Austin similar to yours with Rosie. They ended a year ago. I'm telling you this because I don't want there to be secrets in our relationship. One more thing. My reason for refusing to go out with you when you came to Austin had nothing to do with that man and was not an attempt to punish you for leaving me. I just couldn't risk getting hurt again. Means, will you accept if I invite you on a date?" "No, Dwayne." When Sally said no, I could have been knocked off my feet. Why did she come in the morning and talk about relationships if she didn't want to accept the invitation to a date? "No, I'm not going to start dating you again, Dwayne. Most of my things are in the car. If you want a relationship with me, help me bring it into yours, or better yet, our home." I jumped up, hugged Sally, kissed her, spun her around in my arms, and kissed her again. My feet didn't touch the porch as I ran to her car to start moving things into our house. We called both sets of parents to tell them the news, and all 4 parents joined us for dinner at the cabin that night. When my mother and I were having a moment alone in the kitchen, she took a ring out of her pocket. "I kept this for you. It was your grandmother's ring. If you like it, you can offer it to Sally. I hope Sally likes it. If I know this girl, she will take care of him. I'm giving it to you now because I think you're done being stupid." Yes, Mom. Mom was right. Sally loved her grandmother's ring. As soon as my parents left that evening, I got down on one knee and asked Sally to marry me, holding the ring in front of her. Sally said yes and ran into my arms. That night, we made love for the first time in 3 years. It was magical. Sally and I got married and have 4 children, 1 boy and 3 girls. Before Sally gave birth to our first girl, she built 30 new low-income housing units. This may not seem like much, but it meant decent houses for 30 families who had previously been unable to live in the area, and it was a good start. Someone else can continue this business. Sally is my best friend. How many wives can claim to have gone down to the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon while 5 months pregnant? I can't count the number of nights we spent together under the stars, whether on the ranch or in one of the 24 national parks we visited. And you have never seen anyone, man or woman, who could so accurately throw a fly to the right place in the river, no matter what the wind. We now have the following agreement. She catches fish, and I clean and fry it. Manuel retired the following year, and I became the ranch hand for the next 10 years. Then, when Jeb Davison retired, I took over the family's ranching operations. More desk work than I'd like, but I still get outside when I can. 5 years after returning from Brazil, I received a letter from Joe. The mystery of the restaurant shooting was solved when one of the participants wrote about it. The guys at the back table were rival gangster lieutenants. The 2 at the bar were their bodyguards. When the insult was said, the first 2 began shooting, hitting each other in the chest. The 2 bodyguards shot at rival lieutenants, then at each other. But everyone was wearing heavy body armor, and the 9mm bullets did nothing but bruise. One of the bodyguards was wounded in the upper arm, but all 4 were able to leave the restaurant before blood appeared. Joe wrote that there is now a statue of St. Jude behind the bar, next to 3 bullet holes in the rear mirror, just behind where the bartender stood unharmed. Locals call it the miracle of Alto do Paris. Sally and I introduced Rosie to Henry. Everything worked out for them. Rosie could sit in the bleachers and watch Henry play basketball or softball or whatever. She could cheer him on and never break a nail. They moved into the old house after they bought it from Ginny, but first it had to be refurbished before Rosie agreed to move there. They have 2 children of their own, and we all meet at least once a month. Ginny moved back to Dallas shortly after our divorce. The house stood empty until Henry bought it. Selling a house is about, asked lawyer Ginny. No one knows and no one cares what ultimately happened to Ginny. But we know that somewhere there is a guy who was literally and figuratively deceived. And Dexter Price still sits at the bar at Hen, drinking bottled beer and not interfering in other people's affairs. End. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. 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 Listening to the next one.